Hi everyone, this is Bobby from bn-games.com, and we're doing a video here discussing arcade machines. Now, I usually don't sit in front of the camera, but I thought I would share this experience with everybody. This is almost a year in. I've been into arcade cabinets. Now, I should preface at this, I've always wanted an arcade machine ever since I was little. And in fact, I wanted to build one. I remember distinctly drawing a wooden shape on notebook paper at school and asking my dad to build it. And I remember very distinctly at the time, this is the early 90s, he said, "We can't do that because you can't sit in front of the screen, that close to the screen." And at the time, remember that people were afraid of gamma radiation coming out of the monitors, or somewhat. In fact, they used to sell screens that were basically like sunglasses for CRTs, something like that. And he told me I can't sit in front of it. The arcade machines are designed differently and all this other stuff. So I never got it. I never built it, and I'm still waiting for a goddamn phone booth. He said he'd build me one of those too. Anyway. So yeah, I always wanted one. I just turned 30 this year. Last year I suffered from congestive heart failure, and at 29, and I said, you know what? If something's going to happen to me, I at least need to own one. If you can see behind me, there's 3 of them. Since that happened, I've been on a very wild ride, buying these things and learning the hard way. So let's get into it. I got some talking points. Now, I also want to say that I'm not an expert in arcade machines, not on any level. So take this from my experience so far. And if you disagree with me, leave it in the comments. I mean, I'm learning all about this stuff, but this has been my experience so far. Just some stuff I think I should kind of go over for people who've never bought an arcade machine or are thinking about buying an arcade machine. So, part 1. Where did you find them? I get that question a lot, especially when I post pictures of it. And I know I posted a lot. I'm an arcade picture whore. I love these things. I just love looking at them. There's a beauty to these machines. And I know I post pictures a lot. I admit that completely. And sometimes it's showing off. I admit it. Because I'm very proud of what I've learned and how I've gotten this. I mean, these have been bought off of hard work. I mean, I've worked for these machines. They weren't given to me. And in some cases here, I've done a lot of work to get them going to where they're at anyway. So I'm very proud of them, very happy to have them. And it's a lifelong dream at this point that I've always wanted one of these. So where did you find them? Well, every machine I've bought so far, I've bought off of Craigslist. Now, your city and region may vary. For example, on the East Coast, I know for a fact that there are not many, at least Japanese caps, and we'll get into that a little bit after. But there are more arcade machines on the West Coast and the East Coast available through Craigslist. All of these machines behind me, they have a story, and I've bought them all, actually, but with the exception of this one, the Sega Astro. The other 2. So behind me is the Egret 2, which the person I bought it off of, he called it the Lexus of arcade cabinets. I remember that very distinctly. He was an ex-Blizzard developer, and he was moving, and I bought it off him. That was the first one I bought. Like, I got like the best one first, and probably the most expensive, and I don't even want to say how much I paid for it. Actually, I got a good deal on it. Compared to what I've seen since that time, I actually got a good deal on it. But it certainly was the most expensive of all the machines. But it's the rarest. One of the rarest, anyway. Reason for that being that has a mechanism in it built in to allow the monitor to rotate, where with these 2, if I wanted to rotate the monitors on these for like shmups and any other vertical games, I would literally have to unscrew them, and having done it for one of my dad's machines, lifting it and twisting it and getting it in place is not easy. Not at all. That one person can do it. That's why they're so popular. Besides they're iconic. Anyway. Yeah, so all Craigslist and various people. I guess I'll go through all of them. This one right here, the Thomas Wave. I actually bought this off of Mike from Super Arcade. If you're familiar with Super Arcade, It was in Walnut, California, and he's in the process of this video trying to move in with some difficulty with business licenses and stuff. And he told me that these cabinets don't stand up to abuse, and I can understand why. These, the control panel is metal, but the rest of it's plastic, and I can see if you're hammering on it, it would be a problem. So they don't stand up to abuse, and he's going to stick to American cabs and probably Vulexes for Street Fighter 4 and 5. So I purchased this off of him because he didn't need it anymore. I actually had bought 2 of them. The other one I bought off of him, I actually sold because that one needed a lot of work. This one needed work as well, but the other one was much worse condition. So yeah, this one right here, like I said, I didn't buy this one actually off of Craigslist. I actually bought this off of a place I was taking arcade machines to fix. I bought it from them for $100. This Astro. The reason for that being is it was beat up to hell and dirty as hell. Now, if you follow the channel, you probably saw our video where we took this thing apart and brought it in. Of all the cabinets, this has been the worst one when it came to trying to get this in my office. This machine required literally cutting it in half, literally taking it apart in half, and getting it into the room. And once that happened, once I got it together, it's been great. Got the harness wired for Neo Geo specifically, and I've replaced the control panel, the buttons, the sticks, because the sticks it came with were terrible. Sort of the buttons. Cleaned it up pretty well. It still has a decent amount of graffiti. But for $100, I called the $100 special, and it's a tank. This thing's beautiful. I have not had a problem with it, other than taking it apart was a pain in the ass. And I've seen these things. These things seem to go for $800 usually, but based on the condition of the body, that's why they sold it to me for so cheap. But the monitor's fine. The monitor's great. It's got good picture, good colors. So, yeah. Most of the other machines I've purchased, there's other ones that are not behind here that I've bought through Craigslist postings, and it's one of those things where you need to keep consistently looking at Craigslist, because they come up and then they get sold really quickly, especially Japanese cabinets. Wonder if you can hear the airplane. Japanese cabinets they're rare for the most part, and less in Los Angeles because of our location and because of the region, how proximity to Japan. But other parts of the world, they're much, much harder to get. American cabs very easy to get, depending on what you want. And here in Los Angeles, we have a number of arcade places that restore them. There's one in Glendale, for example, a real popular one. They restore cabinets, although they're quite expensive after they're done with their work. So, as far as getting them, if you're looking for them on the cheap, you can get them on Craigslist. But keep in mind, when you buy them on Craigslist, they're going to have problems. Each one of these required something. So the egret required a completely new stick and button suite, completely. The Atomus Wave here required the same thing. I had to get a second 2-player control panel. This one was not the original one. That was a bit of a search. And they didn't come with the marquees. I had to find those as well. Had to do a lot of internet searching. And then the monitor died. It literally died. And if you've been following me on social media or the channel or anything, you'll know I went through a lot of hell trying to get this thing going. I was actually about to sell this cabinet for a little less than what I paid for it, or half of what. No, let's say a little less. And some people I had talked to about helping with it. Some of them had recommended these really crazy solutions that would have been very expensive. I was looking at possibly having to replace the arcade monitor in this thing, this specific one that would fit in here. And brand new, they're $600-700 before tax and shipping. So very expensive. There was some really great recommendations, like going to arcade auctions and buying something that has something very similar. Any of those sorts of things. The community we'll talk about the community more later in this video. But, there were some suggestions to get around that. But, I was under some dire consequences. I finally found someone fairly close that actually fixes arcade monitors. As you can see, it's running. So, good stuff. All right. I guess we're going to the next thing, because I've been talking a lot about Japanese cabs. Japanese cabs versus American cabs. So, American cabs traditionally are made of wood. The body is made of wood. They use arcade monitors, which are similar to this one and the Egret. They're very similar. But the bodies are wood, and they're stand-up. They're stand-up arcade cabinets. Now, I'm not opposed to those type of machines, but I don't like them personally. Also, they take a lot more room than these. Having owned a few at this point, they take a lot more room than these Japanese cabs. I like the idea of having something I can sit in front of. I'm sitting in the chair I usually use to play on these things, and play it for a little bit, walk away, come back. Standing to play it is not comfortable. It certainly doesn't help for long play sessions. And then the other thing I find, especially for fighting games, if you look at old Street Fighter 2 cabinets, or old Street Fighter cabinets in general, besides the fact that they use like harap, I don't always get the word wrong, but I call them the exclamation point arcade sticks. I hate those things. And on top of that, they usually are the control panels usually at a really severe angle. I really hate that. It's not comfortable. It's not intuitive. And I don't know why it caught on. Now, I understand why American cabs probably caught on in the 80s and 90s. They were made of wood. That means they were relatively cheap to manufacture, versus like this machine right here, which is wood and plastic, and it's it's different kind of assembly. This thing right here, I kind of have an idea how much this machine cost brand new in 2003 when it was manufactured. Insane compared to what you would pay for an American cab made of wood. So I can understand why American cabs are wood, especially shipping them from Japan and, the same game, Street Fighter, that kind of thing. Probably very cost prohibitive. Although, a number of them made it over the ocean. That's how I got these. Japanese cabs, though, there's something about them. It's the look. Like I said, there's something about the look about them. The fact I can sit in front of them. It's a little piece of Tokyo. It's a little piece of the mid to late 90s, which is, a big part of my childhood and people my age and even a little older and a little younger. That time frame is important. I mean, 1996 through 1999. 1999 was Street Fighter 3 Strike. Street Fighter 3 was around there. Marvel vs. Capcom 2. There were a number of other fighting games that were around that time. The culture coming from that time, Japanese games were still dominant. It wasn't American dominant as far as like games that sell. We didn't have Call of Duty, really breaking into sales. We still had good stuff coming from Japan. So in my mind, these personify a time and place in my childhood that it's gone now, obviously, but this is a little piece of history for me, and it keeps. I would consider myself a retro gamer first and foremost, and that's the right time frame for most of these. This cabinet, the Astro, was built in 1993. I kind of like the Neo Geo being there because Neo Geo was a little bigger at that time, for the most part. So it represents, all of them represent a time and a place in my childhood and many of your childhoods that was severely influenced by Japanese game publishing. Sony with the PlayStation, Sega with the Saturn, and then the Dreamcast. During that time was the Xbox, the original Xbox, what game did all of us play? Halo. Okay. Yeah, Halo. But everything else was on a PlayStation. And then PlayStation 2, These all kind of fall in that line. So it is aesthetically a choice. And also the fact, sitting in front of them, that's something about it I like better. Most American cabinets, at least in my mind, as I remember them, were, they're older games that I don't really care for. I appreciate them, but they're not my thing. Like Joust and Pac-Man, original Pac-Man. Those are great games, but they're not what I like. What I like is what you see behind you. And there are American cabs for that stuff, but I kind of already discussed, why I don't really care for that. So, I mean, in the end, it's a preference. I mean, if you like American cabs better, that's great. But I'm a fan of Japanese cabs, and they're rarer than American cabs most of the time. And I don't know, I like them better. That's just me. Now, if you're new to arcade collecting, there's going to be a lot of reading involved. A lot of reading. If you do not like to read, if you don't like reading schematics, if you don't want to try to learn and troubleshoot on your own, this is not a hobby for you. Sorry about that. Having some camera issues there. Rough cut. New camera, so still learning it. But as I was saying, you really need to have some kind of troubleshooting background, or at least some kind of like to do that, because these machines are always troublesome. There's always things that don't make sense. So, for example, the Sega Astro here, if I don't slide the cart in just right, I get no sound. No particular reason why. Now, I know that these motherboards sometimes have sound amp issues. I've read enough about that, but it works. But if I just move it just slightly off, it doesn't work. Now, if that's a cartridge-based system, so you could say, well, I've used an NES. I know if I don't put the card in, it messes up, But there's some weird behavior these things do that don't make sense. Buttons are actually the most frustrating thing. So, for example, the loom on the Atomus Wave here, it probably needs to be replaced at this point. That's probably something I'm going to need to do. But it's very loose. And I have a Sega Naomi, and if you know anything about Naomi hardware, you have a silver box, a conversion box that goes from the Naomi to it, so it works on JAMA natively. And the connector barely fits, and you have to just be very careful with it. Otherwise, it doesn't boot, or other issues. And this is another cartridge thing, because this one, if you don't load it 5 or 6 times in the motherboard, which I've cleaned, by the way, it fails to load the game. There's just, and this stuff sounds pretty minor, but when you think about it, sometimes there's unexplainable things that happen. And like the monitor, why did the monitor die? I'll tell you exactly what happened. So with this one, I had it for about 2 months, and I turned it on one day, and the other two fired up just fine. This one didn't. It was black. But that light, which I had to replace, by the way, turned on, but nothing else. Now, I had this thing set to free play. I have all these set to free play. If you want to use coins, that's up to you. I've watched some videos of people who are real anal about that. If it's your thing, fine. I like them as they are. Like, it's hard arcade hardware, but it's got to be free play. I just want to hit start and play, and when I'm done, walk away. Simple as that. Anyway, so the monitor was black. Was getting nothing. I was getting no sound. You know how well, if you're old enough, remember CRTs. When you turn it on, you can hear it. You hear the static, or you hear the tubes working. And I was getting nothing. It was dead, completely dead. Well, this is another lesson to take. Learn about the people you take your stuff to. So I took it to a particular shop in El Monte. I'm not going to name names. And they had it for a month. And they told me it was blowing diodes. Okay. I'm pretty inexperienced with this. I can solder some stuff. I'm a guitarist. I mean, I know some stuff. But I did not want to take this thing apart, being as expensive as they are and as rare as the parts are. This particular monitor on this particular machine, by the way, is not very good. Everything I've read so far is it's a Weya, and everything I've read basically says it's a piece of shit, bad parts or the cheap parts. And we're talking a lot of reading, a lot of digging. We're talking about posts from 2009 I was looking at. They were saying they were having the same issues I was having. And none of them had any conclusive answers, which was even worse. So I took it to this guy for a month, and he got it apparently working. Told me it was overheating. Couldn't figure out why. I got it here after paying him for the work, believing that he had done something significant, because he said he had run it, all day or whatever. And got it here. 5 minutes later, it died. Screen started wobbling. like almost like it had radio interference. It was like shaking, like water, and all of a sudden it goes, and that was it. I remember in a forum post it put, it reminded me the ending of Terminator 2, you know, when Arnold's in the... Oh, Jesus Christ. How professional is this video? I remember it being like the end of Terminator 2, and, you know, when Arnold's going through the lava, and then, you know, you see the screen go, and it dies. Same thing. Although it was, at the time, I had the demo music on, so you could still hear the jazzy Marvel vs. Capcom 2 music. It was really sad. I took it to another place. This one I don't mind mentioning because they fixed it. I took it to P&L Video Games in... I'll put the link in the video below, but it's not too far from here. About 20-minute drive. I took... I called him first. I said, hey, you know, I'm having a problem with this monitor. I don't know what to do. Can I bring the cabinet? And he told me, no, don't bring the cabinet. Bring the chassis. Was not comfortable with that. Never taken it apart. Don't know how to put it back together. You know, the instructions that I could find are in Japanese. It's pretty daunting. So I said, screw it. It can't get any worse than this. And my thoughts were either I sell the cabinet as is, or I buy a new monitor, and that'll have instructions, and I can put it together from scratch and know exactly how this thing goes together. Well, took it to my dad's house because he had all the tools and the space to take it out. I don't really have it in here. And we took pictures, very good pictures, every angle we could think of. Marco helped with it. And we unplugged it. We pulled the chassis and the control panel and all that stuff and pulled it right out of the back. And we looked at it, and we couldn't see any work done on the motherboard. No soldering of any kind. So whatever diodes the other place had said that they had done, there was nothing. Closest thing I think we all agree, after taking it to get it repaired properly, is they replaced a fuse. That was it. So what ended up happening is I took it to P&L, and 3 days later they fixed it. It took 3 days instead of a month, and it was a bad flyback, which is a pretty big part, and it needed some capacitors replaced, none of which the other place did. So I had paid them for basically nothing, and because of my ignorance of what the issue was and how to fix it, and in some ways my own fault because I was trying to quick fix. I'm like, I can't take it to this guy. They apparently fix arcade machines. Hopefully they get it done. You know, I don't have to try to troubleshoot it myself. Now, having seen the issues and understand how this works, I have a better idea. So I'm not going to start doing cap jobs yet myself with this particular machine, because this goddamn machine, I call it a diva. She's a diva. In fact, you can't see it, but I got a power inverter on it. Step down converter to drop 120 to 110 amp because I think voltage is what is causing the issue, or based on everything I've read and was just suggested, at least for this particular machine. So I'm not playing around with this one. But let's say if this one dies, the Sega, this thing cost me $100. I might actually try to fix it myself, having a better idea of what has happened. So yeah, I mean, that's just one experience, one nightmare. You know, that's like 2 months worth of, you know, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And then that was after I had already bought the panel. I had found someone to sell me the panel, new sticks and buttons, which are not exactly cheap, you know, especially they're brand new. And I'm using LS56s, Famitsu LS56s with an octagonal gate. I'm not a big fan of the JLF 8-way anymore after using these. I'm also using, I think these are LS40s, which are the proper Neo Candy 29 stick, or at least that's what I read. So these are the proper stick on this one. But these two are using the same ones. And, you know, Famitsu buttons on this one, Sunma on that one. I prefer Sunma buttons. But that starts costing money. I mean, they're parts that have to be replaced. I know they're going to last me a long time because I'm not running an arcade and have a bunch of little kids slamming on them. So, you know, I didn't mind. The light bulb was like $20 after shipping, finding the right one that fit. Had to research that. I mean, had to research everything to get these things the way you see them now. Those are marquees. I have a video of unboxing and installing one of those. I had to buy those from a seller in the UK. That video will be in the playlist, my arcade candy playlist. I have all my arcade related videos there. So these are just some experiences in the last 6 months, just minor stuff. I mean, well, not so much minor, but I mean that's just in the last 6 months just to get these where they're at now. That's not including trying to find the games, finding this Naomi with the GD-ROM. I actually drove to Bakersfield and bought it from a guy who was selling all of his hardware from his old arcade. I wanted to make sure it worked, so I got the power supply and the proper stereo amp, Sega stereo amp, and all that stuff. So it's all in there. I made sure it was all together, complete, and working. He gave me a game too, so that was nice. Behind me, Third Strike. I bought that from a guy. I actually bought a cabinet with it, which I gave the cabinet to my dad. I bought it for Third Strike. Of all these machines, of all the games, Third Strike is the most important to me. It's my favorite arcade game. It's my favorite Street Fighter game. It's in my top 5 of games of all time, and I play it nightly. I mean, you'd say that's another question. I didn't even write this one down, but what can you justify what you're doing with this? It's a hobby. This is a hobby. Everyone has a hobby. It's not a cheap hobby, I admit. It's not the most expensive. I mean, as a musician, it can get much more expensive. For example, I need an amplifier. I want a Mesa Boogie Mark 5, I think. The mini, the 25 watt one, and that thing is $1,200, and I haven't brought myself to buy it, for example. But guitars are expensive. I mean, every proper hobby is going to cost you money, and arcade machines are no exception at all. Games are expensive. And now, I actually got some of these for pretty cheap. And then some of this stuff I actually didn't pay outright. I sold stuff. I sold a couple of guitars I didn't need anymore, or didn't want. I sold a couple old 80s Kramers that I have really small hands. And if you know anything about guitars, the neck was just too big for me, for example. And I sold it, and I got that. And that's how I bought the Naomi with this stuff. I had the money. It was almost a trade in that way. And you'll find that also in the community. It's as expensive as people want people to pay for it. So Third Strike, for example, I got it for a good price with a cabinet. Usually Third Strike alone, $600-$700. And if you know anything about CPS3, you know that they're very volatile. I know one day that board's going to die. There's a battery in the cart which will dump the ROM. Now, thankfully, there is some solutions out there to fix it, but it's a pain in the ass, and I got to prep for it because one day it will happen. Arcade hardware is finicky, very finicky. Arcade games, motherboards. I mean, you think about it. The one game, proprietary game, most of the time is being put on some proprietary board of some kind, especially old games. They're old motherboards, old. We're not even I'm talking like 80s, ROM chips. And there's, depending on what the game is, there's entire people out there that all they do is replace specific ROM chips on specific games. It's insane. Just to keep these things going in the original silicon so they don't have to emulate. That's one thing about the community, which is a very, very divided subject, is MAME emulation. Whether you're for it or against it, it's not accurate hardware. I'm not against it personally, but I want the real thing. That's just me. We'll go into that. Community. So, that's my next talking point. In this journey, I have met some very interesting people. There have been some really very nice people, very welcoming people, and then there's been some real fucking assholes. I'm not going to name names because this is a video going on YouTube, and I don't want the comments at the bottom to, become a comment war or something of that nature. But the reality of the situation is there have been some real fucking pricks that I've had to deal with trying to get answers and stuff, namely in forums. Now, I guess that would be the case with any community. I mean, there are plenty of asshole guitarists out there. Everyone thinks they're Yngwie Malmsteen or Van Halen or something, or better, and I'm sorry, that's not the case. And in the arcade community, it's more of a prestige thing, I think, for those who are very difficult, to say the least. But again, like I said, there's been some people really, really nice. There's one particular gentleman I met in Downey. He might see this video. I traded him a Street Fighter the first Street Fighter 3, the first game, because I got that before Third Strike, and he went over a lot of stuff about Neo Geo. He's a huge Neo Geo fan, and showed me all his hardware and stuff. And he's a real nice guy and very knowledgeable. And then there's this other guy I met in a part of the city who I was going to buy stuff off of, and he was just a prick. And that's been the case online as well. You get some people who are very helpful. When I was asking for stuff, on the arcade monitor stuff, there's some people really asking questions, asking for pictures, making some very good suggestions. I mean, that's how I found P&L for the repairs. There's also how I knew about the step-down converter and a bunch of stuff like that that there's no clear guides for when it comes to some of this stuff. And then there's just a bunch of trolls out there on top of it. But like I said, that's any community, But I think in this particular case, at least for arcade machines, in my experience, let's just say in the last 6 months, there's a real snobbishness with certain people with machines who own them. It's very off-putting. There's certain forums, and I'm not going to name them, that I have stopped going to because it was just complete negativity to people who were new asking questions. And then there's other places where completely welcoming, That's kind of why I'm doing this video. It's kind of a primer for anybody who's never bought one of these machines, who's even considering it. I want them to understand that this is, as a hobby, you have to be dedicated, or it's going to cost you a lot of money. And if not, money is going to cost you a lot of heartache, because like I said, they're finicky. They require a lot of patience, more than I have. I admit, more than I have. I've had my fair bit of pulling on my hair because I thought, God damn it, should just work. But sit there and take a breath and say, you know what, this machine is X amount of years old, or the game that you're playing or trying to play or run is X amount of years old. It's depending on what you're doing. There's a lot of age. Age is a factor. So, for example, this Astro was built in 1993. Who knows what's been done to the monitor, where it's lived. I mean, even the video I recorded of taking it apart does not really give you a good idea of how nasty it was. And you think about the motherboard in it, it's a Neo Geo MVS 1 slot. I think it's one of the original models. How old is that stuff? The carts, how old are they? 20, almost 30 years? A Pac-Man, you think about an original Pac-Man machine, what was that? When was that released? Near the time the original Star Wars came out? And like I said, they're replacing ROM chips. This stuff is finicky, and it requires a lot of delicate care and understanding of that. And then keeping it away from people who might actually be a detriment to it, because you don't want people who are very rough on them. I don't want kids coming in here and playing my machines because I know they'll tear them up. I don't want to deal with that. I want these to be preserved for as long as possible, as long as I can in their current form, as working as long as possible, without modifying them. This one, for example, if this monitor dies and I don't want to spend the money, or let's say it dies in 10 years, and monitors become impossible to find, especially flats. These as a flat square, something like this. I got to modify this, probably put an LCD in it, or whatever the equivalent is at that time and place. That kind of ruins some of it, but I still had it and it's working. It might become impossibly expensive to fix because it's so rare to find stuff. This stuff is finite and it's not going to last forever. That's just the fact of life. And like I said about MAME emulation, a lot of the community is very against that, and I understand why. They feel I've bought the proper hardware came out, why are you emulating this on the PC? A lot of emulation is dodgy, it's not exact. There are people out there really, really, it has to be exactly the way, it was in the arcade board. I don't want to run it on the PC. But the truth of the matter is, and this goes for consoles, this goes for, all retro stuff. I mean, most of my retro stuff is not here. This stuff takes too much space. I got it in bins. But all of those PlayStation 1 games, PC games, NES, N64, everything, all my stuff. Eventually, if I don't have a console to run it on, or if TVs don't accept the input signal, or I can't find a TV that has an input signal, or somebody doesn't make a mod for it, the thing that's going to exist forever are PCs in some form, and it will be emulation, and you have to emulate the game. There's the issue with bit rot, which is a very real thing. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. If you're watching this video, you can probably research more. I'm not an expert, but the idea is that all forms of media, all forms, CD and cartridge, eventually the data will become unreadable, unusable over time. I think there's a projection that most of it within 100 years. I think that was something I read very recently. I don't know if that's exactly true, but it's definitely happening. People have already had cartridges that will not start because of bit rot and have been found for that. So eventually these games will have to be emulated, and if you want to play them, they'll be in an emulated format. That also becomes legal issues with the publishers, and after those publishers have been bought and sold and everything else merged by that time. Let's say in a 10 years time, who knows? I mean, Sony right now is the leading console manufacturer. What if they absorb Sega, with like Shenmue 3 coming out? Or what if Microsoft sells Xbox division, like there was rumors and stuff? These are all things that happen, and where do these licenses go? Or what if they buy up these smaller companies? Like, think about all the Japanese publishers that don't exist anymore and have been bought out. And as of this video, I think just a couple weeks ago, maybe even sooner, SNK was bought again by, I think, a Chinese investor group or something like that. So, it comes down to the fact that this stuff is, unfortunately, illegal. ROMs will be the easiest and only way to get your hands on most things without paying out the nose. Let's take Nintendo, for example, their eShop. Why does a Super Nintendo game cost $8 when most mobile games that have about equivalent content are either free or $1, maybe $2? It's ridiculous. So it varies depending on the medium and depending on the content. So my final real talking point is the games. Now, it depends on what you want. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Most games will run off of standard arcade stick and buttons. Racing games do not. If you're a racing game buff, be very careful what you buy, because most racing games require a specific steering wheel, or the steering wheel has a special interface depending on the age and whatever board it's on. Newer games, for example, are just overpriced PCs with lockout keys. And if you don't know what a lockout key is, basically without it, it won't boot. It's a little USB thing. And those sometimes cost more than the machine does to get a replacement. That's newer stuff. But older stuff is real, the interfaces are not universal. They don't use USB, for example. They are all, in many cases, hardwired, or they use a harness type connector. So you have to keep all that in mind as well, depending on the games you want. Now, if you know what game you want, like if you want Street Fighter 2, that's real easy. You get a Street Fighter 2, it'll work on a standard JAMA harness. If you don't know what JAMA harness is, read on that. You need to understand that first. That's about the only thing that's close to standardized when it comes to arcade hardware. And then if you want to kick, you need what's called a kick harness. It's another thing you have to learn about. And there's different kick harnesses for different types. There's CPS1, CPS2. Some boards require it to be soldered. The Naomi original Sega I/O input doesn't use a CPS2, so you have to, or the Capcom input does, so you have to get a different connector, which is even harder to find. I mean, it can be overwhelming if you're not really dedicated to this. You have to be dedicated and really love arcade machines. But at the end of the day, let's finish this up. At the end of the day, with all the complications, with all the money, if you have that kind of money to spend, or if you sold a lot of stuff like I have to get some of this, because I didn't pay cash for all this stuff. I'm not rich. I sold a lot of stuff to get this stuff, in return. if you have the patience, even if it's just one machine, and you come home from work and you're like, you know what, I need to go beat some dudes up. You fire it up, Street Fighter, play a couple rounds, and there's nothing like it. Consoles, you can play Street Fighter 2 on your Super Nintendo, you play Street Fighter 2 in one of the various collections, or you can play Super Turbo, which was a PS3 Xbox game. You can play that stuff on consoles. You can even build yourself arcade sticks, and if you watch the channel, I've built a number of them for different consoles. It's not the same. It's not. I don't care what anybody says. It's not the same. It might be the same interface, might be the same buttons, but it doesn't feel and sound the same. There's something to be said for sitting in front of a machine, a proper arcade machine, and then either inserting a coin or pressing the start, whatever. Sitting in front of an actual arcade machine, knowing that all of these at one point were in a proper arcade at some point. People actually played these machines in a proper setting, and it's in your home, and it's yours, and you can play it anytime you want. Just turn it on, and as long as there are no issues, play it. And like I said, it is its own feeling. There's no way to describe it. It is not the same. Playing consoles is not the same. Console versions of arcade games, anyway. Even if they're arcade perfect. I'm a huge Dreamcast fan. Huge Dreamcast fan. I mean, believe me, big Dreamcast fan. Favorite console of all time. And I have a number of fighting games on the Dreamcast that I have for the Naomi. Naomi is realistically a like a Dreamcast on crack. It has more memory and some other stuff. But it's essentially the same game. But playing it on a console, on a TV, it's not the same as playing it on the real thing. There's a feeling that comes with it. And it's not a required feeling. This is very first world privilege bullshit, if you really think about it. And like, oh, you're playing it on an arcade machine, I don't want to make it sound like you absolutely need to do it this way, or you need to think like I do. Because consoles are probably good for everybody, and it was good enough for me for most of my life. But if you have the patience and really want to experience it, firsthand. Sorry, I'm tired. It's late. There's nothing like it. It's a different feeling. It certainly is. And especially, you get, like I said, there's a community there. There's some really wonderful people out there. And some real assholes. And there's some people out there that really, really care about sharing that feeling. They're playing Facebook groups I've registered with lately, and I would say we're very like-minded people with this. I mean, there are some local arcades, local residences, people who open up their garage or wherever they have their arcade machines and invite people in to play them, just so they can have the real experience, versus going to some dirty, shady arcade that's going to cost you a lot of money. You just go to these people's houses, and it's a community thing. And I plan on myself joining more of that. I don't have people come here specifically. I've had that. I guess I should maybe preface it. I've had some people ask, well, why don't I have people come play these things? Unfortunately, due to the way I work, I have a lot of NDA stuff, and I can't have people in here. So it's a work excuse as well as a practical one. I mean, like I said, I don't want kids on this. I mean, adults. If I knew adults, it'd be fine. Adults that would treat it the same way I would or have that feeling, I'm fine with that. But kids, like I said, I'm 30. I purposely avoided having kids at this point. That's another thing. If you want to afford them or have these things, you can probably have children. It's easier if you don't. But there are a number of people out there that really are into this, and will probably watch this video and understand exactly what I'm saying. And maybe you're probably sitting there like, oh yeah, bullshit. Yeah, whatever. And I don't blame you. But it is a feeling. And I think some people, and that feeling's really real when people message about stuff and they see the pictures and they get it. It's an instant thing. It's instinctual. I've seen plenty of that. So there are people who get it just based on that alone. So anyway, this video is really long of me just talking about stuff, and I want to do this, especially after we got a new camera. Hope it looks okay. The viewfinder's too far away for me to see if I'm blurry or not. Anyway, if you have any questions, put them below. If you would like me to do more videos like this, if you're watching, let me know. Camera issue number 3. Just as I'm doing my outro. If you want me to do these videos, you know, or any other subjects that you think I should talk about, go for it. Anything game related. Stuff I won't touch, really religion and politics for the most part. But if it's retro, if it's arcade, if you want me to talk about this machine, I thought about doing a review of the Thomas Wave. I mean, I've already done a review of the Egret 2, which you can see on the channel. I really don't want to do a review of the Astro because I don't want to show people the state it's in. I mean, it's much better than it was, but oh man, it's kind of sad if you think about it. But like I said, I'm willing to engage with the community if you guys like this stuff. And if you have anything at the bottom you think I'm contradicting, or if you disagree with me, put them in the comments below. We'll have a discussion there. I just ask that you keep it civil. Like I said, I know there's some real assholes out there. If you disagree with me, let's keep it as a conversation. So, all right, everyone. Please subscribe and let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.